Got it.
I'll intro me, you'll intro you, and then you'll intro the show.
Sounds good.
After 20, what is it, 20, this is 26.
Yeah,
Jeez.
that's right.
I think what is it, 10,000 trained monkeys eventually will produce Shakespeare. Where are we in that? Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 26 of the Faitheism Project podcast. My name is Alan Katz, and I have always been grateful to Hebrew School for making me the atheist that I am today.
And my name is Randy Lovejoy, and I am a pastor without a church, living on the fringes of institutional religious life and culture, and loving it. I thought you were going to have some really clever repartee or something, but I'm going to move right on to the intro.
Sometimes I just stand back in awe. The wave of what is it this week just kind of rolls over me.
I don't know. I'm not sure I believe you, Alan. I mean, that's not a good way for us to start this conversation. I'm not sure
I could tell you a story.
Yes. All right, here we go. This one,
ironically, that's what we're talking about today.
Exactly. Can I tell you a story? Because what we found, we in our discussions in the past, we've had a number of threes. Sharing three movies that you really like, sharing some books that you like, different types of things. But one of the things that hit us is how important stories are. And that another way that we can really get to know one another and get to know ourselves, for that matter, is to look back at what are the key stories that have shaped and molded us into who we are. The whole point of a spiritual journey is to discover truth, and it's your truth or the universe's truth, or if you're a theist, God's truth. And that journey is our story if we find what we're looking for. It's natural to want to share what it is that we have found. And I know Alan's found some things he wants to share. I've found some things that I really want to share. And that's not to say that the stories just are a direct line, that they just go from beginning all the way up to the end. Instead, what you find is that there are zigzags, there are highs and lows. There are moments we can't wait to tell, and others that at least I would like to skip, if you don't mind, Alan. We'll just forget those. And then there are those moments where the whole direction of our life has changed. And interestingly, those could be the zig stories or the zag stories that end up affecting our lives. Yeah, it's really tough to tell sometimes which stories are going to have that impact. But those are the ones that we've identified looking back and that we want to talk about today. Moments, either small or extended, that changed our lives. They might not have changed them right at the instant that they happened. Sometimes it can take years for those stories to kind of ripple. And I even think of them as like seeds that are planted, takes them a long time to grow. But with perspective, the moments that we're looking at, these are the game changer stories and moments in our lives, no two ways about it. So we've done some thinking on this, right, Alan? I mean, we've thought about what are some of these stories, these key stories, yeah?
Yeah, it's as you look back at your life, hopefully with some perspective, some of the moments that were really key, you knew they were key as they were happening. There's just no mistaking them. Some you kind of get, but it'll take a little while. But there are some moments that, as I'll explain with one of mine, you think it's one thing, and then a long time after that, you realize that it was something else entirely.
Yeah, and that to me, I used this in an Instagram live thing I did a couple days ago, but World War I wasn't World War I until World War II.
Yeah.
Right? And I think in that same way, some of these stories and moments, we don't really know all that they're going to do until some other things have happened that then it's like we used to do with photography in the days when we had to actually develop the film. It's like you'd take the picture, but you would never know until the film was developed what you'd really gotten. And I feel like that's the way it is with some of these stories in our lives as well.
It's a great metaphor.
Yeah,
I love that metaphor, Randy.
yeah. So, and if you appreciate a metaphor given your profession, that is high praise indeed. I consider
I
that
live for a good metaphor.
well, so I want to start with the first one you wrote in the notes because it's intriguing. You called it Ghosts. And
Yeah.
you said how I saw the light in the middle of a lecture on Ibsen's Ghosts and suddenly understood what it meant to be a storyteller.
Yeah.
And you certainly are that. So tell me the story about that. How did that work for you?
I went to Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, which and I was a drama major. Vassar was a women's college until 1972. When it turned co-ed, and I started going there in 1977,
okay,
which dates me.
Well, we're all dated these days, so.
So I was in the drama department. I thought for at that point that I wanted to be an actor. I also had written a lot, and so writing was also something that I did, but I thought I'd be an actor, and so I was in the drama department with acting in mind. And one of the things that you had to take as some of your prerequisites in the drama department were a bunch of classes in dramatic literature. And the professor of dramatic literature at Vassar was a guy named Everett Sprinchorn, who was one of the world authorities on Strindberg and Ibsen. He had translated a lot of Strindberg's plays. So he was really a highly regarded academic with who had published a lot, and so this was a guy who the gods were talking to.
And did you know that when you took the course? I mean, like, wow, this is a guy I need to listen to. I mean, or like prior to, or was it during the course that you figured that out, or how did that happen?
Sprinchorn had been there a long time, and he, I'll put it this way. When I got to the drama department, they were still talking about someone who just left there 4 years before I got there, who they were convinced she was going to be a star. Her name was Meryl Streep.
Oh, wow.
And they knew when Meryl was at Vassar that Meryl was going to be someone. And at the time, Meryl was just beginning to accomplish things. She really was. She was already beginning to hit. And so in my mind, hey, if Everett Sprinchorn was good enough for Meryl Streep,
good enough for me. Yep. Yeah.
So, but it was a small department, and there was. I revered the people who taught there because I loved being at Vassar. I was not a great high school student. I sucked at high school because I was unmotivated. And my mind wandered a lot. That I got into the colleges that I got into, because I wrote essays, and the essay counted for a lot, and my essay was really good, and so writing saved my bacon. So among the classes that the dramatic literature classes is one where Sprinchorn talks about Ibsen's Ghosts. Now, Henrik Ibsen wrote, his whole idea for writing plays should be useful, that they should be instructive, they should help change society from how it is to a better way. And so Ibsen's plays reflect that thinking. He's always trying to make the world a better place. In Ghosts, it's the story of Mrs. Alving. And Mrs. Alving, she was a very shy person, and so when she was younger, the village priest introduced her to a man who she ended up marrying, but he made her pregnant before they got married, and that's why they ended up marrying. He was a bit of a rake. He had syphilis.
Oh, man.
And he went off and died. They have a child named Oswald, And Oswald, as the play begins, is 18, and he's coming home to die because of syphilis. He inherited the syphilis.
Oh, man.
And so the play is about the sins of the father, ghosts, the sins of the father. And so we've all read the play. And Professor Sprinshaw now begins to deconstruct it so as to really reconstruct it and demonstrate. He's trying to take us to, well, to this moment where now Mrs. Alving, this is all she has in the world is Oswald. And he's, as I said, he's dying, and we've learned all this throughout the entire play. And now we're down to the last moment, and Oswald is in a wheelchair, and Mrs. Oswald is wheeling him downstage to face the audience. She is standing behind him so that he cannot see her face, but the audience is looking at Oswald's face and Mrs. Alving's face behind. And Oswald is saying in the last moments of the play, "Oh, look, Mother, the sun is setting. Isn't it beautiful, Mother, how the sun is setting?" And of course, metaphorically, her whole world is setting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
in that moment, I had chills. I suddenly understood what the whole point of writing was, to take an audience. Hell, I was just listening to a lecture about it. But I could imagine what the audience must feel like to watch this woman's tragedy come down to a fine point, a moment of just theatrical brilliance that captures. And that is the point of theater. It's, we need our stories. We need stories to be told to us. Storytellers are like a culture psychologist, psychiatrists, really. We've always got our pulse on the culture, and we tell you the stories about the culture to tell you, are we doing okay, or are we losing our minds here? So storytellers need to be really good at their craft, because the culture we live in needs us. Mm-hmm. And so now, I did not learn that last part, how important it is, storytellers are to a culture, until really, really, really late in my life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But at the time, the storyteller in me sat upright. And I did not know that storytelling was my thing. But it was the first time that I understood what it was. That was my thing. Randy.
So that sounds like, that was like a seed planted that has, just continued to grow and flourish and blossom in your life.
I think about it all the time.
Yeah.
I know. I knew in the moment it was special, and I've never stopped thinking about it. But I've come to appreciate what that moment represented inside my creative. Well, it was really anything I did creatively as a storyteller before that was what a lot of young writers experience is you have incredible passion, but no voice. Oh, you want to tell a story, but who knows? You don't know what the story is.
Right.
And so you can write 2 or 3 incredible paragraphs, and then the whole thing runs out of steam because you really weren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so what I think this taught me was you need to have somewhere, a destination in mind when you sit down to write.
Oh, that's good.
It makes all the difference in the world.
That's good. Yep. That's good. Yeah, I think, I was trying to think back to the first kind of moment like that in my life where it was like, this experience matters. And then it played a role in the rest of my life. And I think it does take me back to, I don't know if I've told you this story on or offline before, but when we moved to Australia when I was in elementary school, and but one of the, so we'd make some trips back and forth over those 2 years to the US and back, but it was such a long distance.
Oh my God.
We'd set up trips to different places on the way, right? So one time we ended up in apartheid South Africa, and somehow through some connection, we knew somebody that was a member of the some member of the Kruger family or a relative related to them in Johannesburg. And we were going to dinner with them. And again, I was in elementary school. And what I remember was we were living in Australia at the time, and they didn't have as many freeways there as we did in Texas. So I remember in Australia, wondering why that was with, kid's mind. We went to Johannesburg, and there were some amazing freeways. And I was like, oh, I didn't expect freeways, just from the stereotypes that were out there. So we're walking by freeways with a well-off family about to go to dinner, and we passed by this guy in a black shroud, and when he looked up to me, he had no nose. And later found out that was my first interaction with a leper.
Mm-hmm.
And he put his hand out.
An actual.
That's right. And he put his hand out, and there were just some stubs, on the fingertips. But we gave him some money and continued on. And the thing that stuck in my mind there was, how are we all in the same world, on the same planet, where there's such disparate experiences with my family, with other parts of the world, even within a particular country, and just such different experiences of what existence is. All of that, wasn't necessarily in words, but it was like that was planted. It was one of those things as a kid, it was like, oh, that's gone deep down.
Deep empathy.
Yeah. Empathy, which motivated questioning.
Yes. How can there be?
Yeah.
How can there be suffering?
Yeah, exactly.
Like this, and how can that be?
That's right. And so,
and what can we do about it?
Yeah. And, actually, the other two parts of that trip to South Africa that were problematic and kind of built into that experience. One was that we had this taxi driver, and he was taking our whole family, and there was he was Afrikaans, and there was a black South African woman running across the street a bit late. She shouldn't have been running across the street. The light was green. He hit the accelerator and then hit the brakes really hard just to scare her. And my middle sister, I had to actually help my dad hold her back from slugging the guy as he said, "Them women donkeys don't know nothing," and I remember again as a kid being like, whoa, what's that all about? And it was those kinds of experiences that was just kind of the kernel that then over time other experiences kind of connected to it as I continued on. But that was probably, that's one of those things that if that hadn't happened to me, it was a very momentary thing, meeting this leper. But if that hadn't happened to me, I have no idea who I would be, where my life would have gone, because it opened me up to travel, to really wanting to learn about other cultures and people that live differently than me. It opened me up to a concern for people that were not doing as well as I was, according to how the world worked.
The leper, that leper really, you bounced off that moment and changed. Would you say you changed direction?
Eventually, it was a seed that over time, what happened later related directly to that was when I was in college, I read the book City of Joy. And the character I liked, of course, they extracted from the script for the Patrick Swayze movie. But there was a priest actually in the story as well. So read the book. If you've seen the movie, please read the book. But anyway, there was a Western priest who was giving his life to the poor in this city called, ironically, the City of Joy in India. And that spurred me on after graduation to say, you know what, I want to go and be in relationship as best as I can, in relationship with the poorest people I can hang out with, to build on that experience in South Africa, but also just to understand better who they are, what their life is like, and how I might be able to make a difference in terms of that. And so that really, following college, I went for 2 years to work in Latin America. And it was a direct result of that experience, reading City of Joy, and finding an organization. And this was hard too, but finding an organization that actually let me live with the poor rather than living in a separate place with the Westerners who are all wanting to care for the poor, but we're not going to live with them. I wanted to be thrown right in. And so I ended up being on an island called La Isla del Tigre in the Golfo de Fonseca in Honduras that even had a listening post, a U.S. military listening post on top of the dormant volcano into Nicaragua at the time, because that was the whole Iran-Contra during that stuff. And living there for 3 months, sleeping in hammocks, living with the refugees. A lot of them were refugees from El Salvador, which is also in major turmoil then as well.
Mm-hmm.
But to try to just learn what I could and be in relationship in whatever way I could with really the majority, much closer to the majority experience on this planet than my experience had been as an American. So anyway, all from there, and that continues to this day. That continues to have an impact in all sorts of different ways, even while I'm
Clearly.
in LA. We decided to buy a place in Echo Park at the same time that some people from other parts of LA told us that their daughters couldn't babysit our kids because we lived in Echo Park and they didn't allow their kids to go to Echo Park, or seeing that Denzel Washington, right when I bought a place here, I saw
what year did you what year did you, I apologize, what year did you buy in Echo Park?
It was 20 years ago now. It had to be right in, maybe, might have even been, it was probably like 2002, 2001, 2002, something like that.
We lived in Echo Park during the riot.
Oh, did you really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, we lived in we had a really nice craftsman with a Western, it was up in the hills. Just north of Sunset with a Western view, and we were able to watch the fires move slowly up Western Avenue as the riots overtook the city.
That was the first time I saw this part of LA. Was after that there's a Church of the Nazarene that's a really interesting inner city church that's very involved in inner city issues, and they had set up ways that people could come help clean things up. And so we ended up over by MacArthur Park cleaning up things there. And it's fascinating. I mean, this is another one of those things. It's fascinating to think back on that. And at that time, it seemed so foreign to me because we were actually in Pasadena. I was in seminary at Pasadena when that happened. And so to go to MacArthur Park seemed very like, whoa, this is pretty sketchy, scary place, right? But then the crazy thing is we live now like 2 miles away from there, and raised both of our sons 2 miles away from there. So, it's just it's fascinating what happens in life. And
LA, as we both know, it's not like any other place.
No, it really isn't. And tell me about that, because you apparently you had some stereotypical, or you didn't like LA, and you had to have an experience that really.
Yeah, it's funny.
So how did that work out?
My second story is how I ended up in LA. Which was a huge change, major change of direction. I went to, like I said, I went to Vassar. And then
Were you
after,
kind of an East Coast guy before
oh
that, or?
God, yes. Oh my
Okay, all
God. And
right,
then I spent a bunch of years living in New York and sharing
yeah,
a house with a couple of friends. And, New York, we were broke as hell, but in New York, you either have to be really poor or really rich. There's no
yeah.
room for anybody in between. So we were really poor. So life was really good. It was great fun. And New York was the center of the world. And LA was the stupidest place on the planet. It was, in my mind, the land of the avocado head. Well, all right. So I had a friend who, from high school, who went out to LA, and she had become an agent at William Morris. And this was like 1984. 1985. She says, you should write a screenplay. And I said, yeah, okay. So I sat down and I wrote one. I sent it to her. She said, this is pretty good. You should come out and meet and greet people. I thought,
Wow.
oh, okay. So I came out for a week. This is June 1985.
Okay.
And I fly out to LA, spending money I do not have, but coming out, and it's a tremendous week. Everyone was so super nice to me.
Mhm.
There was just all these meetings, and people had read my script and really liked it. And what else do you have in mind? And I had something else that I was kind of pitching. So it was great fun. I really loved it. And on one night, my agent, there was a premiere of a movie called St. Elmo's Fire. It was a
Oh
premiere.
yeah, sure.
And
Yep,
so she said, "Hey, come on, we'll go to the premiere." And so we were there at the premiere, and everyone was there. It was quite impressive, and
I
who
bet.
you're rubbing elbows with, and the food is really good, and the drink is really good, and it's kind of intoxicating. And then I think a day or so after that, I had a morning off, and someone said, "Hey, if you have some time, take a drive through Topanga Canyon." Now, this is 1985. It's 1,000 years ago, long before LA was as built up as it is, and
Yeah.
long before Topanga was.
Yeah.
It was more wild back then, but it
Yeah.
was still within the city limits. I take this drive, and as I'm driving from the 101 south through the canyons, and it's beautiful. It really is. It's extraordinary. And by the time you get to you're in the city limits. And by the time you get to where the Santa Monica Mountains plunge into the Pacific, a Pacific Coast Highway, I was completely seduced.
Yeah.
It was done. LA had completely gotten to me. And from that moment, I knew when I went back to New York, and I landed in Newark, and I got on the bus and into the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan. It's June in New York. It's hot. The humidity is 1,000%. Stinks of piss and oh my God, it just refuse. I could not imagine living in New York or anywhere on the East Coast for 2 more seconds. And I flew out several weeks later, and I found a place to live. And then in August, I drove out.
Wow.
And really and truly, it was that drive through Topanga Canyon that absolutely did it. I knew as soon as I hit Pacific Coast Highway, that LA was my lady.
Yeah, that Pac Coast Highway is tough to beat. I'll tell you what, just driving up from Santa Monica like to Santa Barbara or something. I mean, it's just this constant. It's like this place is so beautiful. Oh my gosh, it's pretty incredible.
The other day, last week, Helen and I decided to, just after the big precipitation we had here, we had. We didn't get the dump that East Coast did, but we decided to drive up and touch the snow.
Mm-hmm.
So, Angelinos, we drove up the Angeles Crest Highway,
right,
in line with all the other Angelinos who wanted to touch the snow, the filthy, dirty snow at the side of the road. Yeah. And so we did. We touched the snow. We had our experience with the weather, and then we turned home and turned around, went home where the weather was nice.
And I mean, that's the other incredible thing to me about LA. Although you have to add the traffic into the mix, which is a bummer, but you can go from, mountain even snow to beach,
Yes.
it's really not that far. Now the traffic makes it,
Could
you know,
theoretically do a
yeah,
you could do a run down the mountain first thing in the morning,
yeah,
jump in your car,
yeah,
and yeah, by mid-afternoon you could absolutely be surfing.
yeah, yeah. Which that's always just been crazy to me as well. And then the other thing we've talked about with LA that I've appreciated, and again, maybe it goes back to my South Africa story, but just that there are so many cultures represented here, that you know, it's a city that you know, I never feel like I've seen all of it, or even I mean, I know a small part of it. I don't know the whole thing. And even when I was writing the book God in La La Land, it was like I wrote in the, you know, preface, like, I hope this spurs other people to write about their experience, because I know I'm just kind of this eastern part of LA kind of experience, and other people that live in other parts,
No,
there's, you
there's
know.
no other kind of LA. It's only East Side experience. And the only legitimate West Siders. Oh God,
That's right. That's right. That's right.
they're like
Exactly.
carpetbaggers. Worse.
Well, that's, you know, my second story is about a city that really caught my heart as well. I love LA, and it's definitely, I think in the U.S. LA is just it's really the most amazing city I know in this country. But there's another one that I love as well, and that one really became a part of my life in high school. We had moved back from Australia to Houston, lived there for about 3 years. I had started ninth grade. I was you know, almost finished with ninth grade actually, when my dad was transferred again to London, England. And Australia had prepped me for it, so, you know, I was pretty excited about it. But when we moved there, you know, I suddenly realized the vast expanse of human history in a way that never hit before. You know, because when I left to Houston, Texas, where, like, if a house was 100 years old, it was ancient. And we got to London, and I remember while we were still looking for a place, one of the articles in the newspaper was about the construction workers that were complaining because yet again they ran into Roman ruins, and it's going to delay the whole project while the archaeologists come in and check it out. And they're like, how many Roman ruins do we have to run into that affect any of our building projects? And I just thought, okay, this is like a
That's
different,
old. That's old.
yeah, it's like there's history. So this is a really different framework. And that was just the beginning of the way that London really opened my mind. I mean, South Africa and Australia opened my mind to the world, but I think London really opened my mind to the vastness of human history, and just how fascinating all, you know, talk about stories. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so many stories in human history that are fascinating when they're well told. You know, the sad thing is that some historians that know a lot of facts are not good storytellers.
Indeed.
And so some history is very dry. But when you find the ones that can tell the stories well, I mean, it's such, just the history is amazing. So one of the ones, I thought you'd appreciate this, because this is where I think I met my first atheist. He was an avowed Marxist who was at the time marching in Brixton with some of the uprisings that were taking place there. But he was also my media professor in high school in London. And he's the guy, he was a critical player in helping me to come to understand. You talk about not being motivated in high school. High school in London motivated me in a way I'd never been motivated academically before. This guy was part of it. One, he brought us, you know, we came into school and each one of us had to get a different London newspaper. I think there were about 5 or 6 at the time. And this was before the interwebs, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So this was like print news, right? So we had to all bring all the papers in. And then what we had to do was pick a particular story and then look at how it was presented in each one of the newspapers. and from that deduce where that paper was coming from in its perspective. And he taught us to really, read the article, even look at how the photograph was taken, that if they wanted the person to look overly powerful, they'd take it from below. If they wanted them to look like some small person, they'd take it from up above, all of that kind of thing.
Editorializing in all different kinds of subtle ways.
Definitely. Yeah. And it was just fascinating. It was fascinating. And then he's the guy, he's actually this Marxist teacher was the guy that got me thinking about my faith, because when he heard I was a Christian, he came over to me and he said, "So you believe in pie in the sky when you die?" But the way he said it, there was this twinkle in his eye that I knew what he was saying to me was, believe it, that's fine, but you better know why you believe that this is true. You cannot just let it sit there. And I've always been appreciative.
He wanted to challenge you
for that. Yes, it was a challenge, but it wasn't a challenge like, "Oh, you're an idiot for believing this."
No.
Even though he may have
that's not
thought
the
that.
point.
But it was a challenge of know why you believe what you believe. And that's something London did for me. It set me on a path of I want to know why I believe what I believe. It's not enough for me just to believe it, but why? And can I actually support it? And is there a better way to believe than how I believe? Or is this, yes, in fact, the best path to take? And that continues today. That's another seed.
But that's the nature of a spiritual journey.
That's right. That's right.
And that's why a spiritual journey transcends labels and brands and all that stuff, because yes, all that's saying that why. It's why.
Yeah.
That core, why is this? Why are we here?
Exactly.
And
exactly.
What is the point?
And once you've got an answer to that question, can you support that? And is that answer actually going to do anything useful on this planet? Certainly with religion in general and with Christianity in particular, is there a way to live this out that creates good in the world? And is there a way to live this out that actually screws things up in the world? And what's the difference? And how do I make sure that my following this is the part that creates good rather than the part that just creates more trouble in the world?
It's good to have a plan.
Yeah. And so London continues to be another one of these cities that whenever I go there, which is not enough, but whenever I go there, it just lights up all of these things. And South Africa, for that matter. I mean, I loved watching what happened with Mandela, with watching the path that they chose to take, with the way that they've moved forward. And yes, they've had troubles, struggles, and still have troubles and struggles. But I still think that's another magical place. And I don't know if you've ever been to Cape Town, but Cape Town, you would fall in love there too, because it's almost like it has a lot of the same components Silver Lake does, but it's in a setting with that Table Mountain, with like the beauty there is kind of like that drive that you mentioned. So yeah, LA and Cape Town and London to me are just amazing.
You have lived some interesting places.
Planet. Yeah. So, and one thing I just wanted to throw in,
you didn't end up in Akron.
I did not end up in Akron. I did not. One of the things that I just want to throw in on there too is one of the things about London that I think it's brought it to the surface again as we've been going through this pandemic and the political struggles that we've talked about, and even the social justice issues and all of that. We're in a really tough time. All of us are. I mean, this is a challenging time. And London was a challenging time. When I first moved there, it was late in the school year. It took 3 months for me to find friends. And it was probably one of the loneliest periods in my life. I just had one Jay Giles band album that I don't know how many times I listened to, because I'd go to school and come home and sit at home because I had no friends, and it took months to figure that out. And then on the flip side of London, my parents got a divorce in the last year that I lived there, and it was a very painful time on that side. But nevertheless, that whole time was just seminal to my life and who I am and how I live today, even though it was incredibly hard. And the lesson that I just wanted to share with folks listening is this time we're in is going to continue to be very hard. It's not going to be, I know we want it over with. It's going to take a good while to work through all the stuff that's happened the last number of years. But the thing is that even in the midst of the hardships and difficulties, if you can grab hold of and be intentional about moving forward in your life, this is also a time of massive opportunity. And it will be a time that's planting all sorts of seeds that will develop in our lives years from now that we can't even see right now. And so I mean that as a hopeful thing, but you do need to stay engaged. You do need to stay intentional. You need to keep moving forward, even in the midst of all of the challenges that I think the next few years are going to bring to us. So
it can be surprising sometimes when the ripple finally catches up.
That's right. That's right.
The valuable life lesson that you wouldn't have gotten, you could never have learned without the experience. And the worst part, without the time it took.
That's right. Yeah.
Plus the experience. It's
there's a lot of experiences in our lives. I don't know if it's the zigs or the zags. I don't know which ones are the positive or negative, but a lot of experience in our lives that we're never going to wish that we're never going to be glad that they happened, the events in themselves. And yet they are events that are critical to really shaping us in an important way. And I think all of us are going to wish 2020 had not happened for the rest of our lives. But out of that, there's all sorts of potential and possibilities in all of our lives that even as we continue to regret that year, whatever happened to us, it's still going to be something that has real potential to shape us into better people, deeper people, more caring people. It can do that.
Indeed. At the end of the day, that needs to be the outcome.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, I have to throw this in really fast before we go to your third story, just because I'm going to get in serious trouble with my wife in particular. But I do need to say that one of the reasons...
You're much more sentimental than I am.
Well, one of the reasons that Latin America was so critical for me as well was that was where I met my wife, because she was from LA. I was from Texas and Australia and London. And so yeah, she's from, Glendora, in LA. That's all been a part of her life since this is where she's lived the most in her life by far. So of course, the only way we were going to meet was to meet in Mexico City. I mean, it just makes sense, right? I mean, LA, Texas, Mexico City is where we're going to meet. Yeah. And that's where we met, and that's where we dated. And then we dated in Honduras some more. And then our first year of marriage was in Mexico City as well as our first kiss. We remember where that was, in the Zocalo in Mexico was the first kiss. So that part of my life, and even the LA part of my life, I don't know how that would have happened without going to Latin America and meeting Cheryl, because really the reason I first came to LA was primarily because that was where my wife was from. I was thinking of either going to Princeton Seminary or to Fuller Seminary in Pasadena, but there really wasn't much of a question on that because my wife was from LA, her family was from LA, we just got married. It just made sense. And it was after moving here, that was when I learned to really fall in love with this place as well. Yeah, so that's how I ended up in Los Angeles, was via Mexico City and meeting Cheryl there. And it was over time that I learned to really love LA as well. Now, that's not to say that there aren't there aren't some parts of LA that sort of fit the stereotype where somebody took the U.S. and put it up on its side, and everything that wasn't screwed in ended
Frank
up in
Lloyd
LA.
Wright. That's a quote from Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright said, if you tip the world over on its side, all the loose bits would end up in Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, right. So
yeah, that's us.
So there's some crazy things about LA as well, and some. I mean, there's the dark side to LA also. So, so did you run into that dark side once you were kind of committed to being here and made this your home?
Oh gosh, yes. I'm so glad you asked. The worst thing that ever happened to me when I got to Los Angeles, and I love this place, and I hate this place, but I love this place. The worst thing that ever happened to me, about 4 months in, I set up a script, and someone paid me to write it. And that's the worst thing that ever happened, because in that moment, I didn't realize that I had sold out, but I did. And I stopped writing from here, and I started writing for here. It's like, hey, what do you want me to write? And I still was originating ideas, but the money is the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all evil. It's really, money is neither here nor there. It was the chasing of it. I didn't realize how much that impacted me.
Yeah.
I got really lucky. I set up that script. I met a guy who became my dearest friend and my writing partner for 10 years, a guy named Gil Adler. And with Gil, we ended up doing a show for HBO called Tales from the Crypt. And as part of Tales from the Crypt, we were very lucky. The show was successful, and they wanted us to make a couple of feature films. And so we made, in between one season, we made a really good movie called Demon Knight, directed by a great director named Ernest Dickerson. He did a really good job. And when Universal, who was our studio, gave us the assignment to say, we're going to make 3 Tales from the Crypt movies, each one different from the other. I was happy. The money was good, and selling out wasn't costing me anything, as far as I could tell. And selling out wasn't costing any. Thank you, Randy. Selling out wasn't less effusive. Selling out wasn't costing me anything, as far as I could tell. So, we were doing this. The second feature was this a psychological thriller called Dead Easy that took place in New Orleans, and we spent about 4 weeks in New Orleans prepping. We were about 3 weeks away from beginning formal prep when suddenly Universal, our studio, pulled the plug on this movie that we all really wanted to make, the psychological thriller that took place in New Orleans called Dead Easy. And instead, they told us, no, you're going to make this other movie. Now, what behind the scenes was this. This is back in 1990-ish, 1995, I think. And a new studio called DreamWorks was just beginning. And Universal was very much afraid that DreamWorks would take some of its talent, and they were especially afraid that DreamWorks would, because Steven Spielberg was DreamWorks, and Steven Spielberg's one of his dearest friends is Robin Zemeckis, who was one of my executive producers on Tales from the Crypt. And so to try to keep Bob Zemeckis from leaving Universal for DreamWorks, they said to Bob, hey, Bob, what can we do to get you to stay? And Bob is the most wonderful collaborator. He's a great creative partner. He's wonderful to work with, and incredibly loyal. And he's always been very, very loyal to his first writing partner, Bob Gale, with whom he wrote all the Back to the Future movies. And Bob Gale's a very talented guy. He's not had the career that Bob Z has. And occasionally Bob Gale has needed some money, and Bob Z has found ways to help his friend. He's great that way. And so Bob Zemeckis saw a way to help his friend Bob Gale. He said, hey, maybe if you bought the first script that Gail and I ever wrote when we were at USC as film school students. It's called Bordello of Blood. Yeah, just buy that. And so Universal said, great. And so Bob agreed to stay, and they bought the script. And then Universal got to thinking, boy, we just spent $500,000. That surely there's some other way rather than just wasting this money. And they turned and they looked at us, and they said, hey, you're making a horror movie. You don't care what horror movie you're making, right? And hey, we're going to give you a script written by Bob Zemeckis instead. And so they canceled the movie that we all wanted to make in New Orleans, dead easy. And they said, no, you're going to make this movie called Bordello of Blood instead. Now,
in New Orleans as well, or did you have
to
move
no, forget us. Oh, that all.
So it was just like all the work that you'd done in New Orleans. It was like, well, that's done.
But
start over again.
Like it never happened. And the thing about Bordello of Blood, it was the first screenplay that the two Bobs ever wrote when they were in film school, and it reads like a film school, like two film school students wrote it. It's about a bordello in the basement of a mortuary, and it's run and all the hookers are vampires. Okay, it's a cute idea, but we were making a psychological horror movie about found memory, and suddenly we're making this stupid movie. Well, the reason I'm telling this story in part is that every day that I made Bordello of Blood was stupider than the day before it. Now, we made literally nobody wanted to make Bordello of Blood. The audience, there was not an audience calling out for somebody make Bordello of Blood. Nobody, not even the filmmakers, wanted to make Bordello of Blood.
Not a good start.
Made this movie.
Yeah.
This is Bordello of Blood, perversely, and I'm so sorry I was part of it. This, at the end of the day, it's an okay movie, but it epitomizes literally everything that people, when they think of all the evils of Hollywood, just the wretched, not the wretched excess. We didn't have a budget for wretched excess, but just the excess, the bad behavior, just the stupid decision making. And when you consider, the Bob Zemeckis, Joel Silver, Richard Donner were my executive producers. We had a tremendous the amount of talent that this talent could make that turd of a movie is all right. Yeah. So, and again, the worst thing that ever happened to me was I sold out at the very first. But this chicken is coming home to roost. This is what this story is all about. All right, so bear with me. So, where do we make the movie? Well, we were always in a battle. One of my executive producers, Joel Silver, was always in a battle with the IA, our union that all of our crew belonged to. And sometimes the union, sometimes we were in a superior position and we dictated the terms, and sometimes the IA was. They had just struck us on a TV movie. And so Joel was rather pissed at the IA. And so as his way to say, screw me, no, screw you, we said, we're not going to do the movie in Los Angeles. We're going to do it somewhere else. And so we went to Vancouver, not because we wanted to do the movie in Vancouver. We went to Vancouver to say, screw you to our union. Which, hey, the union, they had other projects that were working on. Our crew didn't. Really, we said our screw you to the union was a screw you to our crew. So, and a crew that had worked with us for years. So right off the bat, we were doing stupid things for stupid reasons.
And it wasn't about the show itself. I mean, that's it. What I'm hearing so far is there's so many other things going on rather than the actual film itself. And that shows that.
I'll give you for instance, how stupid it was. We were making a horror movie. Now, horror movies, the thing you need a lot of in a horror movie is night. You need night. You're going to shoot a lot of nights. We were making our movie in July, and we went to Vancouver in July to make our horror movie. And one of the things you don't have a whole lot of in July in Vancouver is night, because you are so far north. You do not have a whole lot of night. That's why summer in Vancouver is wonderful, because the day lasts forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not so good when you're trying to shoot a horror movie in
That's
it.
right.
It's
Other types
bad.
of
Okay.
films, it might work, just
You,
fine. But
if you were smart filmmakers, you would never go to Vancouver to make your horror movie. You would have thought, oh no, wait, we're making a horror movie. Let's go anywhere but Vancouver. Let's not go north.
yeah.
But we weren't thinking that way. This is the nature of how we were doing things. All right. So Joel would not let us cast our leads. We wanted. It's a detective who is trying to get to the bottom of what is happening in this bordello. Why do people suddenly vanish? And all right. We wanted to cast one of the Baldwin brothers, Danny Baldwin, and he'd read for us, and yeah, well, Danny Baldwin would have been great. No, Joel was going to cast our 3 leads, and he insisted that we have Dennis Miller as our lead. Now, Dennis Miller's a talented guy. He's funny. But in terms of our movie, our audience didn't care about Dennis Miller. Dennis Miller was nothing to them. Our audience is coming to see hookers in the basement of vampire hookers in the basement of a mortuary. They want blood and guts. They don't care about Dennis Miller. But
yeah, it's kind of like you're after the same audience as Carl's Jr. with their hamburgers. It seems to me.
Yeah. That same dumb guy that they're appealing to. That's our audience, and we love our audience. But, all right. So Joel insists. All right. So Dennis Miller, and Dennis doesn't want to do the movie, and so he says, figuring. I said, yeah, you give me $1 million. Figuring we're not going to give him $1 million. No one had ever given him $1 million to do anything. For some reason, Joel says yes. And suddenly there we are with Dennis Miller. Well, Universal, our studio, says, well, we don't want Dennis Miller. He's nothing to us. We had our budget was $13 million. We had $250,000 in the budget for our lead actor. And Universal, we said, well, can we get some breakage from you guys? They said, no. They said, you got $250, take it out of your budget. Well, all our money was in special effects makeup, which is what our audience wanted. So we took it out of the thing our audience wanted and put it into an actor nobody wanted.
Oh boy.
Okay. So now we're going to come back to Dennis, because Dennis is kind of where our story is going to lead. We also cast the villain. Now in a horror movie, the villain's really important. How you cast Freddy Krueger is going to matter. Okay. Yeah. Jason, you can get away with because he's in a mask, but in our first Tales movie, Demon Knight, we cast Billy Zane as the villain, and Billy did a great job. He was really sensational, and he made that movie. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We had in mind, we had read and we really were excited about Robin Givens. And Robin, she was a black actress. I think she's still working. She was married to Mike Tyson for a little while.
Right.
And,
sure.
And,
yeah, I know.
We understood that Robin, could be a difficult person to work with, but hey, we work with Joel Silver, so it's nothing to us. So we said, great, Robin Givens. And Joel had another idea. At the time that we were going to be shooting our movie in Vancouver, Joel was shooting a movie just across the border in Seattle called Assassins with Antonio Banderas and Sly Stallone. And at the time, Sly Stallone was engaged to a model named Angie Everhart. Now, one day on the set of Assassins, I guess Stallone walks up to Joel and says, "Hey, Joel, you've been making a movie, and my girlfriend Angie, you've been in your horror movie. Why don't you put in your horror movie, Joel?" And Joel, rather than saying, "Well, let me talk to the guys," he goes, "That's a great idea." Because that's how Joel is. "That's a great idea, Sly." And the next thing you know, says, Joel approaches Gil and I, and he says, "No, not Robin Givens. I got a better idea. Angie Everhart." We go, "What?" This was just for some background reference. And Joel had a movie in the can that he hadn't released yet called Fair Game. And Joel thought he was on the cusp of something new, supermodels in movies. Okay. And that starred Cindy Crawford. Uh-huh. And of course, then Fair Game opened after we shot our movie and bombed, in part because Cindy Crawford's a great supermodel. She's not an actress. Mm-hmm. It did not. Yeah. Yeah. But Joel didn't know that yet. So we were going to be the next part of the wave. And so Angie, he says, and Angie's a lovely person, and really she's sensational. But casting anything is really, that's 90% of your work. If you cast well, you're okay. If you cast badly, you're going to fight that every day.
Time. Yeah.
So we said to Joel, God, please don't make us do this. We had worked with Billy Friedkin, who did The Exorcist, had done an episode of Crypt, and we had a good relationship with Billy. We liked working with Billy, and he had just done a movie called Jade with Angie. We got Billy on the phone. We said, Billy, how's Angie? As an actress, she's really nice. She's a very nice person.
Which is not what you asked, right?
We said to Joel, look, let's screen test her. We figured a screen test would settle the deal. Right. And that didn't work either. There was no convincing them. And in the end, we were forced to cast Angie. Yeah. And Angie, she did the best she possibly could, but it's a tough assignment. It is. And it was an unfair ask. Oh, and this is a whole story for a whole other, I won't even go into this. There was a whole other reason why Sly wanted to cast Angie in our movie, and had to do with she wouldn't be in Seattle because he had something else going on.
Oh boy.
Hey, it's Hollywood. Yeah, and we were part of it. Okay. So meanwhile, back in Vancouver. Okay. So we started.
But again, what's striking me so far though is just there's so many things going on that are not what should be the point of the whole exercise.
No, everything is beside the point. Nothing's organic.
Off script, if I can say that. You keep getting off script on this whole thing because there's all this other stuff pulling you in different directions.
Oh God, yes.
And then you're in the middle of this and you're not wanting to be there either. And it's pulling you off of script of your life, as well. So yeah, anyway.
All right. So we start shooting the movie, and on our first day of photography, Joel decides to fly across the border. This is one quick setup. Fly across the border just to spend the day with us. Joel, he doesn't drive himself. He's got a fleet of guys. He's got a fleet of cars back then and guys who drove him. He flies across an international border without any ID whatsoever.
Oh no.
And he arrives in Vancouver, and of course, the Canadian customs people, who are you? And Joel goes off. They held him for 4 hours. And, this is the Tasmanian devil. And they finally let him go. And we had a driver who'd been there 4 hours looking for him. Joel is like the Tasmanian devil as a pinball going through the Vancouver airport, screaming at everyone. Finally comes to our driver. And before he comes out to where we were on location that first day, he wanted to stop by the offices we were using. We had taken over an abandoned GM plant, and he walks in the door because he was going to blame our Canadian office staff for what had happened to him at the airport. And our whole staff, they were almost entirely female. They were lovely. Mm-hmm. And I'm on the location. I get a call from my assistant. You better come now because Joel is just exploded and everyone is about to quit. And so I run back and I literally on my knees at the door begging my staff not to quit. All right. Most of them stayed. A few weeks go by. Now production goes. And Dennis, talented man, but he's not a happy man, and he's not happy until everyone around him is just as miserable as he is. And though his wife is from Vancouver, in a matter of moments, he seems to have our entire Canadian crew hating his guts. He's funny, but when you're the butt of his joke, it's not so funny. At the time, Dennis was shooting his HBO show. And so they would rehearse on Thursday, shoot on Friday. So we had to change our week. Now our weekend for our crew was Thursday, Friday. Well, that's not what they signed on to do. They wanted to have their weekend, Saturday, Sunday, like they expected to with their families. And it's a Canadian summer.
Yeah.
So Dennis was, we did, that wasn't the deal we made, but our crew stayed with us. And so, Dennis has just got everyone pissed off, and then he would send us this, we get the best trailer in Vancouver for Dennis because, he's got to be in communication with his people, and we want to make sure he's rested for us. It's got a bigger bed than the house they rented for me in Vancouver. It's the best trailer in Vancouver, for Pete's sake. But every morning he sends his assistant in to tell me, oh, Dennis is so tired. Can we shoot him out? And then, he'll go back to the hotel and rest. And, I said, first day, yeah, okay, I guess we'll be okay. And then it became a thing. And every day we would shoot out Dennis. Now, what that means in practical terms is, as we do a scene in front of the camera, we would shoot Dennis's side with all the actors working with Dennis. And then when we turn around, a couple hours later to shoot the other side of the scene, you have to do a relight. So Dennis is standing behind the camera, acting toward the actors. There wasn't Dennis. Dennis was back at the hotel resting. Now, the other thing about Dennis is that when Dennis first arrived on the first day on set and I went to hand him the script, now look, it's bordello of blood. It is a piece of crap. I know it's a piece of crap. And I'm handing a comedian with an HBO show a script that I know is crap. So I'm already in a very weak place. So as I go to hand Dennis on day one his script, here's the new script, Dennis. He says, here's the deal, Catsy, and that becomes my nickname. He says, I read the script, and I that's just not how I'm going to work. I just, those words just aren't going to come out of my mouth. Hey, I couldn't blame him. I wouldn't want those words coming out of my mouth. But okay, so he said, so I'm just going to improv. I'm going to, I'll just improvise. And I'll go over with you what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to do that. And that's what he did. And so every day, Dennis would improvise all his own dialogue, and frequently big pieces of information that the story needed just never got into the dialogue. And of course, he's improvising, but the other actors aren't improvising. They've got a script.
Right.
So they're trying to figure out how to work with this guy. And then when we go and we do the other side, it's the script supervisor trying to remember what Dennis said to work with the actors. Weeks go by. And now, we're now behind schedule. Every day was stupider than the day before.
Oh man, that just sounds horrible.
All right. So then the day comes. So now a day comes where we have a complex shot. Dennis is going to walk into, it's a torture chamber scene, and he's going to stop. He's going to leap over a banister. So there's a cut there. So there's a stunt for the leap over the banister. We pick him up on the other side. When he lands, he picks up an axe and he's going to bury it in Angie's shoulder. And the camera's going to be behind Angie. It's going to be this cool special effect of watching her shoulder separate.
Oh gosh,
it's just a really cool. It's a horror movie, It's just
sure, right.
But then her shoulder heals. Her shoulder heals because she's a monster, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's a very complicated day. I mean, I've got pieces I got to lock off. If I screw up any one of these elements, we can take the whole day's work and throw it away.
Yeah.
Dennis's assistant comes to me first thing in the morning, as she always says, Dennis is so tired. Can we? And I said, no, I can't do it today. No. She says, Dennis is going to be really upset. I said, I don't care if Dennis is going to be upset. No. I said, no. The answer is no. He can't leave today. No. I said, no, he can't leave today. No, the answer is no. He says, okay. And off she goes. Well, Joel comes to visit us from Seattle that day, which is, hey, it's his prerogative. And
with his
Joel
identification this time, I take it.
He did this time. Yes, he did. He was clever enough to bring some ideas. He flew across an international border like an adult. So he arrives, and he doesn't say hello to anyone, any of us peons in the producers in the office. He goes straight to his star because that's the most important thing. And he goes out to Dennis's trailer. Dennis, how are you? And Dennis says, I'm really angry. What? Why are you angry? Well, I'm really tired, and Catsy won't shoot me out today. What? He said, hey, look, if you're tired, you want to go back to the hotel? You go back to the hotel. I'll deal with Cats. My executive producer, who I'm protecting, has just taken my legs out from under me forever. Yeah. I can never, ever say no to my star, who I've never said no to. Ever. I can't even think about it. All right. So now my executive producer, who's just stabbed me in the back, goes out onto our big stage, which is a big factory floor, but big stage with all of our people, and he spots me. And Joel's got a big voice, and he goes, "Cats, cats, come over here." Now I'm doing the walk of shame across
Right.
the studio floor, and
Yes.
my whole crew is watching me. I'm the boss theoretically. Do the walk of shame to his boss, and I get to Joel, and Joel says to me, "I got to tell you something, Kens. Your people skills are shit."
That's so perfect that what he's demonstrating as he's saying that is.
And I have inside my head, I can only explain that I suddenly realized, oh my God, I've just experienced the most ironic moment
That's right.
of my life that I could ever possibly, in anyone's life could ever possibly live, because Joel Silver has just told me that my people skills are shit.
That's so good.
Now then, Joel begins to try to build me back together again. He tells me a story about Michael Jackson to illustrate to me how it's about your actors. You got to do whatever your actors want. You got to do whatever your actors want. And there's this crazy story about Michael Jackson on a music video set. They tell the whole crew, you will not talk to Michael Jackson. You talk to Michael, you're fired. And so there's a set, a props assistant is doing his job. He's got a broken arm, and Michael walks up to him and says, "Hey, so you got a broken arm? Have a new arm?" And he answers the question, and they fire him. And Joel's telling me this story, and the next day, Michael shows up, and in sympathy, he's got a cast on his arm. Now, of course, the point of the story is that Michael could have gone to the producers and said, "Hey, I asked the guy a question. Hire him back, you idiots." But no, Michael doesn't do that. He does something completely irrational. That doesn't help the guy at all. All right, so Joel tells me this story to begin to build me back up, and I'm looking at him like, I have no idea what that story does for me. And then he begins to tell me about working with Bruce Willis on what's that movie with the skyscraper on Christmas?
No, I know it's I'll think of it. I know.
Yeah, and all right. Every day on that movie continues to be stupider than the day before it, and all right. And
Die Hard, is that the one you were?
Die Hard, yeah. So
okay.
and I continue to think that I've experienced the most ironic moment of my entire life. Now, my career does what it does. The depression that I'm in slowly begins to take hold. Blah 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 blah, and it's not until I get to the other side of my depression, and I begin to reconsider my life on the other side of depression, where you don't have, where your perspective is being limited. And I'm really beginning to look at everything that happened as honestly as I possibly can. And I come to that moment as I'm reviewing the situation. And I suddenly realize that the most ironic moment of my life, Joel Silver telling me my people skills are shit, was actually not ironic at all. The irony, it turns out, is that there is no irony. That Joel was absolutely right. Now, when Dennis sent his assistant to me that morning, when what I should have done was I should have said to his assistant, you know what, let me go talk to Dennis. And I should have walked out to Dennis's trailer and said, hey, Dennis, look, here's the deal. And I bet if I walked out there and done that, I bet I wouldn't have had a problem with my star. In point of fact, Joel Silver was 100% right. My people skills were shit.
That's interesting. It's awesome that you can see that, given the way that it was delivered and the whole story.
A long way to go to get to that, but I really have come to appreciate. I wish I had recognized the truth at the time. He would have saved me an awful lot of heartache. But when that realization struck me, what that moment really meant, when it finally resonated the way it was supposed to, the impact on my life and my people skills
Yeah.
were considerable.
That's interesting. That's interesting because again, that's like something we talked about earlier with it's a very painful experience in multiple levels, and
Yeah.
yet,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hey,
and
success
yet
teaches
it
you
developed
nothing.
into something critical for you. So yeah, yeah,
Success teaches you nothing. All success teaches you is that your
yeah.
shit doesn't smell. Well, you're incorrect. Your shit does smell. The only thing is you're confused. You think it doesn't, but it does.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Success,
yeah,
failure, on the other hand, hey, if you just open your mind a teensy bit, will teach you everything.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and isn't that hard? Even like with raising our kids and things, you want to keep your kids from experiencing failure in a way. There's like some part that's like, no, how can I help? But it's like, no, no, no. Actually, they need to experience that as a part of their life because those are those experiences, those stories that are going to shape
Amen,
them.
brother.
Yeah,
Amen.
yeah,
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 really and truly,
yeah.
it's something that we.
Let me
It
throw
hurts
this
to
in
watch your
too.
kid fail, but they'll
Yeah,
learn so much from it.
right. Because I've seen the flip side of that multiple times as a pastor where there would be a child in the family that was kind of the problem child. But what I find a lot of times was part of the problem of that problem child was that family members would swoop in to save them
Yes.
before they hit bottom and would help them just enough so that they could continue in their misery and not deal with the fact that the experience like you had with Joel Silver,
Mm.
look at themselves and realize that what are they doing to as a part of this thing. And I've seen that happen multiple times and in very sad situations where I try to tell the parents, you need to, I know it's hard, but do not bail them out. Let them, they've got to go further down so that they'll start acting differently. But if you keep bailing them out, then they're just going to continue in this misery and
They'll
never
always be bailed
face.
out.
Exactly. So, I mean, I love that because that's the essential. Those stories that are painful for us
Oh, yes.
can really show us the critical stuff. They can be gold. They can be the treasure in our life if we're able, and that's what I love about this story you've just told, if we're able to see what the
Long-winded as it
treasure is in
was.
there. Yeah, because I mean, you could have just come out of that saying, you know what, everybody else screwed this up.
Mm.
I mean, that's what you could have said. And people do that.
Oh,
everybody
sure.
else screwed up my life. And it's like, no, no, no. Actually,
No.
I was a part of this. And look what I learned from this, and that's, man, that is, I mean, that's next level humanity right there. Being a human that can do that, you're entering another level that I think is critical to becoming
I still
real
wish we'd
people.
made a better movie.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, that's the deal. But and yet, if that had been a really successful film,
It was never going to be. It was impossible.
but
It was
but
a
but
literal impossibility.
but I mean, the point being that
Yeah,
the
yeah,
fact that it didn't do well
yeah.
actually makes it all make sense in terms of the impact it had in your life. You know what I mean? So,
But it didn't deserve to do well.
right, sure.
It it
Well, and
it, it
again, and that's the other thing I will take from your story is, when I'm doing something, do something for the thing that I'm doing, not for 12 other reasons. Because if it really matters, I need to be focused on that task and doing it for the sake of the task from the heart, rather than, oh, let's just do this for 25 other people that want this happen and this happen and this happen. And and I think maybe, I don't know, would you say another good lesson is if you find yourself in a situation like you were in, if there's any way to extract yourself from it, get the heck out of there.
yes, because really, yeah.
But if you're stuck in it, then learn the lesson. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
If at all possible, as I said, I wish I had my God, we can never travel down those paths. We made that we chose the fork in the road a long time ago.
Yep.
But when it occurred to me what the correct answer to his to Dennis's assistant was, suddenly that informed every conversation I have with anybody ever again. And really to stop and think, it's perspective.
Yeah.
Perspective is the thing you must always try to make try to have as much on your plate as possible.
Yep. No, that's good. That's good. And I'm just thinking, I mean, we spent a lot of time just on a few stories in our life, and I would love anybody that's listening to the podcast, I'd like to hear their stories, because that's the thing. When you get down to the stories like this for different people, there's just no end to the stories, and they're all so fascinating, and just hearing what people went through and how they engaged things and what they learned or didn't learn from it or whatever. That's the stuff of life. And to me, that's the stuff that really just burns away all the stereotypes and prejudices and all that, is when we can actually hear each other's stories, not just what's your opinion on this subject. That's one level, but the real stuff is, what are the stories that have made you who you are? And I think if we could really speak more at that level with other folks, I think the kind of commonality we're finding on this podcast, we would find it with a lot of other people too.
That is exactly it. And it is again, by hearing each other's stories that we discover more and more how much we have in common.
That's right. And then that strengthens our relationships. It strengthens our community. It enables us then to do things.
You can tolerate
together.
Your differences a lot better, because suddenly the different your differences really are simply part of a larger picture where, for the most part, you have things alike.
Well, and even, and I think the other, just to even appreciate the differences, even when we don't agree, is to still be able to at least appreciate, okay, that's a different perspective. Yes. And I appreciate that perspective.
The why. And so long as you understand why the other person feels the way that they do, and you respect it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And you understand that it's coming from a particular place. How we, again, it's once you hear their story, you understand the why.
Yes.
And we all make sense in the context of our stories.
That's right. That's
right.
Which,
hey, was the point of today's exercise.
Exactly. So all of you listening, get out there and share stories with others and find out the why. And you will help make this, we'll make it through this crazy time we're in a better way if we're all out there doing that.
Yeah. And as important as telling your story, telling your testimony is speaking your testimony. Okay. Is hearing the testimony of others.
That's right.
That's right. It's one of the things that I appreciate about Christianity, is the nature of people speaking their testimony. Hear my story.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
That's there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, because here are the things I believe. Let me tell you the 10 things I believe. That's one thing, but to hear their story,
yes, that
is, to me, that's just way more powerful and way more effective. And then I can hear the 10 things you believe or something. But tell me it's almost like I want to hear the stories first, and then tell me what you believe. And that's way more effective than just starting,
the context.
The context is huge. The context is huge. So
that context can take what might seem loopy when you hear it just without the context to, all right, it's loopy, but I understand.
I understand how you got there, or why you're there, or whatever. Yeah.
And then suddenly, we're less inclined to scream at each other.
Yep.
And
with that,
on that bombshell, I loved your stories, Randy.
It's yours, Alan. I mean, yours too. I mean, I feel like I learned a bunch just from that bordello of blood story. Just really opened up some things in terms of understanding you, and in terms of
Oh dear.
and in terms of just thinking about life and my own approach to things. I mean, it was very helpful. So thanks for sharing that. Much appreciated.
It is a pleasure. It's like therapy. It's always good to get that off one's chest.
That's right. Exactly.
Thank you all for joining us. So always a pleasure. Hey, we'll see you next time, and keep the faith.
That's right. Very good. Love it.